welcome to the Wood and Work podcast. I am your host, Josh Taylor from Josh Taylor Woodworking. And here we have Paul from JCR Builds.
Hello, everybody.
How you doing, Paul?
Yeah, the reason Josh is laughing, everyone, is because I was just telling him that all the mess ups he's doing at the minute are going on to a little blooper reel that we'll do. So, obviously, he's finding it highly amusing. So, yeah. Today, one thing that we brought up in the last episode, which we in fact recorded yesterday, was that Josh didn't have a clue what the dots on the side of a jigsaw meant. So, we thought we'd
I did have a clue.
You're just totally the wrong thing.
It just wasn't the right clue. That's all.
So
it was misinformation that I've picked up from site along the years from Have a Go Carpenters.
Yeah, it was totally and utterly incorrect. So
But it sounded right when someone told me.
Basically, what we're going to do today, we thought we just run through a few different things, like router directions, how to build up timber, different types of blades, because you should use different blades, amount of teeth, and so we're just going to run through a few little basics for those that are interested. So at least now, if you're not interested in that, you can go and listen to one of our other podcasts that we have on our channel. So first off, very important one that people get wrong all the time is router direction. Now, this is because we're not talking about climb cuts or milling cuts, because they are something entirely different. We are talking about, say, if you have a flat piece of wood and you want to put a little round over edge or a chamfer on the outside. So, obviously the router, as you stand above the router, it spins anti-clockwise, the router cutter does. So, as you look at it, it's spinning anti-clockwise. Now, you always want the router cutter to pull in to the workpiece, because if it doesn't, and you're using a straight edge, if it's trying to pull away from the edge or the piece, it'll veer off into the middle of your workpiece and damage it. So you always want it pulling in to the workpiece. So a very good way, I mean, I've done a couple of shorts on this a few times on my channel. A very easy way to know which way to do this is you take your right hand and you put your thumb and your first finger pointing out at 90 degrees. Then what you do is you take that and put it on the corner of the piece of wood. So as you put that on a piece of wood, this works at any corner, you start where the 90 degree corner is and you go in the direction that your first finger is pointing. So then, if you turn that around to any corner of any piece of wood, it doesn't even have to be a square piece, you will always go in that direction. Same with a round. If you take a round and you put that down on top of the piece of wood,
What's a round?
Piece of wood, like a tabletop.
Oh, yeah.
So if you put that then down over the piece of wood, you get your start point, which is your 90 degree, and your finger will point in the direction you want to run on. Alternative though, so that's on the outside of a piece of wood. So if you're doing like a door, if you've got a cutout in the middle of a piece of wood, you go the opposite direction because of the way the blade is turning anti-clockwise. So if you've got, because effectively you're going then with the piece of wood and you'll go too fast. So you always want the cutter to go against the direction you're pushing the router. So because if you go too fast, if you put a router down and you go right to left, it's going to whiz across the piece of wood really quick because the router cutter's picking up the piece of wood and trying to throw it out. So you always go with the cutter going against the direction you're moving. So on the outside, the finger works a treat, and then on the inside, just of an inside of the piece, you go clockwise on all occasions. Now, a router table is different again, because with a router table, your router is effectively upside down. So everyone looks at a router table and go, oh right, I need to feed, as you stood looking at the router from the left to the right. That will always be wrong. Again, it'll pick up the piece of wood and fire it out the other side. at a million miles an hour, and obviously it's super dangerous. So with the router table, because it's upside down, the router is, you will feed your piece from the right as you're facing and stood at looking at the router. You will stand on the right. The piece will go from the right to the left, and that's for. It doesn't matter if you're doing internal or external the router table, because the router table is effectively different. But of course, with a router table, you may use a fence. You may use a pin to help guide the workpiece in, so you don't snap the piece the wrong way. So with a pin on the router table, you press your piece onto the pin and then you feed that into the cutter. Because if the cutter snags the piece, it'll fly it off because it's going the wrong direction for the piece.
And with them router tables, I see a lot of people make them themselves. Do like companies sell them like on the
So
side?
repeat that, sorry.
Do companies sell router tables
Yes,
separately? You know,
there's lots of companies that will do. I mean, obviously, some people will actually want to use their router in a router table, but quite often you can buy a router lift. I know the Trion, the Triton, the Triton router is a very, very good router and popular router for router tables. Trend make a lot of router tables, but again, they are predominantly designed to be used with the Trend routers, like the T11, I think it is, and the T14. So again, with a router table, you can get lots of hobbyist router tables, and you'll just put a a quarter-inch router cutter, a router bit, so a router that only takes quarter-inch in a small one. But generally, you tend to find with a router table that they will be for the half-inch routers, which it doesn't mean you can't use the quarter shanks or the 8mm shanks. You just tend to use the
yeah.
half-inch routers because they have more power, as a rule, because they'll be like more the 1500 watt, 2000 watt routers, whereas a quarter-inch router
Yeah.
will generally be around 1000, 1100 watts. So it hasn't got the power for the big bits. And then that leads you into speed for your router cutter. Now, speeds for router cutters, a lot of people will just put it on, say, number 6, which is the top speed for a lot of tools, and go, hey, let's go, boom. They don't think.
I think that's what I do.
Especially with routers cutters, it's super, super dangerous. It's not because the tool can't handle it; it's because the bit could just explode. So when you look at a diameter of a router bit, so if you're say using a 12.7mm, which is your popular kitchen cutter worktop joint size, you tend to use that and say you'll spin that at 20,000 RPM. It's not a problem because the RPM is measured at the center point of the router of the collet. So as you've put a bigger bit, so if that's spinning at 20,000 RPM, if you had a bit that's 50mm big, the outside of that bit is going to be spinning at 100,000 RPM or something like that because of the way mathematics. It's just maths. The bigger the circle,
Yeah.
the outside is going to be spinning. So with the bigger the router cutter, the slower the speed. And likewise, a lot of routers will have a maximum size bit it can use. And this is just because of it's for a safety reason. If you need a stupidly big bit, go and get a spindle molder, which are basically just big router tables, but specifically designed for that sort of thing. I think like the Festool OF 1400, I think the max size bit's like 62mm. So
yeah, I've got that. I got a 60mm bit, and it just about fits in there.
But you see, like I actually made the mistake. I bought some raised panel bits the other day, or a few weeks ago, for doing like shaker doors. You know, the raised panels in the centre. Looked at the bit, and it's like 100mm bit. Like, oh crap! It needs to be on a proper spindle molder. So it's a totally different thing. So you can't even use that on the router table because it's too. The router determines what size bit you can use, not your router table. So you can't then just put the OF 1400 into the CMS table and go, oh, I can use a bigger bit now. No. Dangerous. Very dangerous. And this is also something, again, with I learnt the hard way, as a lot of things we do. If you ever need to put a router extension piece into a router, for the love of God, do not buy a cheap Chinese one, Christ almighty. They will explode. And this happened to me. I mean, I only had an 1/8 inch round over bit in. I was making some hardwood dominoes. And the minute the piece of oak touched that cutter, the cutter and the extension bit snapped, flew out the table at God knows what speed. The piece of wood went flying that I had. I was on the drive. The router cutter ended up 30 foot away. On the other, it ended up on the other
Wow.
side of it because I was in the front of my house on my driveway, and it ended up across the road in the other person's front garden on the other side of the road. So do not use, if you're going to use a router cutter extension, please use a reputable brand like CMT, Trend, Whiteside. Only use the correct one for that. Don't go bodging collets. I've seen people trying to use the wrong size, use an 8mm collet, and then they put a bit of tape around the router cutter to pack it out to take. No, don't do it. Only use it. Yeah, we all do stupid things and we use tools wrong and what have you. It's stupid. I mean, it's not a case of being like trying to be super, health and safety conscious and all that. It's a safety thing. All woodworking tools are dangerous. You can lose fingers and hands and even more. I've seen horror videos of a spindle moulder. Someone caught the finger in it, and it pulled the entire nerve out of the right arm. The entire nerve just got ripped out.
Yeah.
So they effectively lost their arm.
Yeah, it's not uncommon to see people with
Not
missing
as a
fingers,
joiner,
is it? In the trade,
because
I've seen it every couple of years. I see someone on site. 2 or 3 years, I'll be like, "Oh, what happened?" One guy, the last one I see was about a year and a half ago. Using a drop saw, and his jumper got caught in there. Ripped his thumb off. Thumbless. And a lot of the Greeks out here actually used to chop their little finger off for compensation. Used to get $1 million
wow,
out here. Used to get a lot of money, but they've stopped that now. But you see a lot of old Greek fellas with a
that's why
missing
is it?
finger.
Ah.
Yeah,
It's. I mean, I've lost.
but
I've got a few flat fingers on the ends. Like I've taken off like literally the tips. Nothing bad, only a couple of mil. I mean, I've hit the bone several times with saws, and like I've gone down to knuckles and bones and ligaments, and I can guarantee you every single time it's because you're either
you're
rushing,
rushing.
you haven't got the workpiece correctly secured, like clamped down properly, or you're using the wrong tool for the
Yeah,
job. You wrong speeds, wrong settings, wrong saw blade, doing something stupid that you know you shouldn't do. You think, it's only one cut, it'll be okay. No, that they're the times you lose your finger or your hand or worse. It's just, I mean, yeah, as you say, it's very, especially bench joiners. They very often you'll see the older guys. I'm sorry, the other lads that are sort of like 50, 60, the older lads that have been doing it for some years. You can guarantee every single one's got at least part of a finger missing because mate, our tools are super dangerous, and every time you ask someone how it's done it, it's because they've not been paying attention, or they're using the tool wrong saw blade, or you know what I
yeah.
mean.
What did you do recently? You had a problem with the Arbortech,
It
didn't
wasn't
you?
it wasn't Arbitech. It was a copy of one of their turbo blades. So it wasn't an Arbitech branded stuff. It was one of the sort of like cutting grinding discs.
Oh
And
yeah.
I hadn't got the piece clamped down properly. It was my fault. And then as the grinding disc hit the ball blank that I was doing, so the ball blank jumped, somehow came loose, bounced off the table, hit my knuckle on my middle finger on my left hand, and it took the knuckle clean off. And you can see you can literally see the ligaments and tendons in that finger. The blade on the because it's attached to the angle grinder. So I hit the workbench with that. That very quickly then bounced up and hit my first finger on my left hand, and I lost all the skin and flesh from my middle knuckle down to my nail on my first finger, and literally it was like the entire thing was just gone, wiped off. And that was because I did not clamp something down properly. Stupid
Oh,
mistake. But yeah, so that's how you. I mean, if anybody wants to watch any videos on the outer direction, I'll put a link to my little shorts that I've done on YouTube. It's only like 10 seconds long, so you can actually see. So obviously, it's subtitled.
yeah,
So
sounds
that's
good.
a similar sort of thing when we talk about milling the timber. So if you've got, it all depends because I know a lot of machines are different. So I have a all-in-one machine where I have a jointer on the top, and then underneath is the planer thicknesser. It is very common that people will have separate jointers and planer thicknessers. It's one of those preferences, I think, for a lot of people. Obviously, generally in a workshop, you will have a freestanding heavy duty for each machine. These are more the sort of the portable ones. So, like, I've got the 10-inch SIP one. And again, so you'll notice if you put a piece of wood through a planer the wrong way, the piece of wood will shoot out super, super quick. Because all the blade is doing, as the blade is returning, is catching that piece of wood and then it's pushing. It'll just push the piece of wood out the other way. So it's quite comical. You put a piece of wood through and it'll shoot off at 100 miles an hour through the machine. So again, you want to go against the way the blade is cutting. So you push the piece of wood in or over the jointer, and the blade effectively is trying to push it back away from you. So you, bit by bit, it's pulling it through, and that's how you take it off nice and clean. And the thing is, with planers, you want to be taken off. If you try and take 6 mil off on a pass, firstly, you're stupid. But this is where you'll get a lot of breakout, and it'll, rather than sort of like planing, which is taking a nice, to give you a nice smooth finish, it's going to be taking chunks out. So you end up with chunks missing all over the wood. So, I mean,
Yeah,
a soft wood you can easily get away with 2 mil, I'd say. The harder the wood, the smaller the pass you want to do. Even to the point where, when I was doing some purple art, do you remember that purple wood that we used on our mallet build? Yeah.
yeah, I still got it. Still
So I
got
was doing
some.
that at 0.5 mil passes because it's so hard as a wood. So
Yeah,
you just want to go 0.5 mil at a time. And the way you mill up a timber, for those who don't know, you'll start off with a piece of rough sawn, and it's obviously it's not square. So you put one face over the jointer, and that will give you a one side flat. You then put your fence on the jointer at 90 degrees. You then reference off that fence, and you do one of the edges with the jointer, because that will ensure that the second face, which is an edge, is perfectly square to the face you've already planed. And you have two sides at a perfect 90. You then put it through a planer on the rough sawn side, because you've already got a flat side from the jointer, and that will give you three sides perfectly flat. And then to get the fourth side, you run it through a table saw using a fence as a reference. So you
why can't you run it through the back through the thicknesser
you'd have to
for the
reference
fourth side?
reference off the thin
That
side
should,
to make it square. So if you're doing a say, I
yeah.
suppose if you're doing like a 4x4 post or a 6x6, you could do that, yes, 100%, because you've got a nice edge. But say if you're doing some 50 mil by 20 mil, you don't want to be bouncing a piece of wood at 20 mil, mate, running through a planer.
So what if you've not got
Yeah,
you got a thicknesser, but you don't have
right.
a jointer to get that
So
one
what
flat
you
edge?
can
What do
do
you do then?
is you get a flat piece of board that you know is flat. So something like maybe like a melamine board that we use for epoxy molds, kitchen cabinets. They're the ones with the almost plastic coated face. So then what you
Yeah,
do is you get your slab and you
yeah,
put it on the board, and you put wedges under the board, because if it's rocking, it's all over the place. So as it goes through the planer, So if you put a cut board, say, through a planer, the planer makes it go flat as you're doing it, but it'll come out cut still. You'll never get it flat. So what you need to do is support it all the way around the edges. So you can use little wedges, a bit of a glue gun. You glue it into place so you've got a nice solid board with no rocking, with wedges everywhere. You run that side through the planer that's got the raw wood on, and that will give you a perfectly flat face. You then take it off the milling board because you've got a flat face to reference to.
That sounds like a lot of work though, so it's probably easier just to get a jointer
you
in
haven't
it.
got, as you say, so if you go for like one of the portable ones, so if you're looking at a Makita one, you're looking at about £1,000, 2,000 Australian dollars for your Makita thing. But then if you want a jointer, you'd be looking at another $300-400 a pound, sorry. Then, it's another $1,000. So if you've only got the portable thicknesser, it's a way that you can mill a board.
Yeah, I need to get a jointer. It's good to have in your arsenal if you ever got like rough timber. You can.
The rough timber is also
get it nice.
A lot nicer because it's cheap. Well, it's cheaper for start, and you can make it the size you want. So if you buy a 3x2 planed all round from the shop, it's not 3 inches by 2 inches. It's 2 3/4 by 1 3/4 because it starts off as being rough sawn at 3x2, and then you're playing it, so it's not 3x2. So if you want a 3x2 timber that's planed all the way round, you buy a 4x2. But you have to go a 4x3, and then plane it down to get your 3x2 because it's classed as what they call nominal sizes.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can. I mean, there's plenty of videos on YouTube how to make a router sled. Sorry, it's not a router sled. It's a sled, a jointer sled. If you do only have a portable planer thicknesser, I mean, a planer thicknesser are the same thing. It's just different terminology for different countries. So it is really a planer, but here in the UK we tend to call it a thicknesser because you're determining the thickness of the wood overall. But yeah, it's not so much about speeds with planers. It's more about you try to get a finished surface. So when you're using a hand plane, you don't try and take off 3-4 mil. You take off 0.5 mil, don't you, at a time with every little with your block plane or your number 4 smoothing plane. You go very, very fine because that gives you the nice plain finish.
Yeah, that's how I had to when I was doing my table legs. I learned the hard way. I kept putting it through. I was like, this thickness is not bloody working. It's still coming out
Right, that's
like
because,
cut,
yes.
like you said. I was like, all right, I used my brain, sat there, thought about it. And then I had to I hand planed one side, got the square, got the rule, got it flat, and then put it through. But still, it wasn't 100% perfect.
So
it was as good as I could get it,
flat board. You then put that square table leg, if you like, on the board, and you wedge it under the cut bits with little triangle wooden wedges. Glue them in place, we can't move, and that gives you, by running it through the thickness, the reference face, which is what you're talking about. Now, effectively, that's exactly what you did with the hand plane. You gave yourself a flat face to reference from. Because if your reference face is wrong and isn't square, there's nothing you're not going to get. There's 100% you are not getting that piece square. You always got, with woodworking, we always reference off one side to start with. So you start with, like if you're cutting a table, a square, you don't go. So if you've got a board and you want to cut an oblong out of it, you cut yourself a straight line. You know that's straight because you've done it with a rail saw or whatever. So that becomes your point of reference. Now, a lot of people make the mistake is they'll cut a 90 degree off that and then another 90 degree. Well, no, because if you're out, you compound your errors. So what you do is you would take a measurement from that. So if you're 3 foot wide, you might mark 3 foot, and cut a line parallel to that. And that gives you 2 straight sides. You then use a square and you reference the ends off your parallel lines, and that's how you make sure a piece would be a perfect square, oblong, whatever size it is you actually need. You never cut one side to three. You don't work round in series. You do your long side, you reference off the long side, you do the opposite side, and then you do your two ends referencing with a square off your two long sides. But you always use the first cut as the reference in everything. For marking out, you always need a part. You always need a point of reference when we're marking out. A point of reference is the first line you always draw. That is always your point of reference. You reference everything from that.
So moving on to blades and what type of blade to use for what different type of job, because most people use just one blade and they don't want to spend the money. They don't want to spend the money.
You see it all the time on the talk groups, like the carpenter talk groups on good old Facebook. And they're like, everyone said, "Oh, what blade do we need for? Oh, you want to get this? No, you don't. That's the wrong blade for that saw." Yeah, but it'd be all right though. It doesn't matter if it'll be. It's not. There's different saws have different blades for a reason. They have different uses. They're not. There isn't one blade that does it all. And quite frankly, anybody that says one blade will do it all is an absolute imbecile. Because they're wrong. So generally, obviously, to start with, you have your blade diameter, and this will vary for your saw, whether it be a plunge saw, table saw, chop saw, drop saw as you call them. You have a blade diameter. So quite commonly, it's 165 mil for like a circular saw and a plunge saw. That's your standard size-ish. I think that's for DeWalt, Makita, Festool. I think 165 is the most popular blade size. We'll use that just for an example. So the next number you need to look at is the kerf. Now, this is very, very important. So some saws have a riving knife on. For the love of God, do not take the riving knife out the bloody saw. That is an accident waiting to happen. And you are an absolute idiot if you take it out. So the riving knife is generally slightly thinner than what the kerf of your blade is. So the kerf is the thickness of your blade. So quite often this is either 1.8 mil or 2.2 mil. Now, if you don't have a riving knife, say like on the new Festool battery saw, even though that is designed for the 1.8, you can use a 2.2 mil blade on it safely. That's not a problem. But what I'm saying is, generally, you wouldn't buy a 2.2 curve saw because they'll have a riving knife on and put a 1.8 blade on it. The riving knife
What's
is
the riving
to
knife
ease
for?
tension of a board. So sometimes if you're cutting a board on, say, a table saw, and the blade will start binding because the wood is then trying to close up with the tension behind the blade. So you'd stick a little wedge in there to alleviate tension. On a bandsaw, you do it as well. You'll put a little wedge in there to alleviate tension.
Yeah.
The riving knife is to alleviate tension in the board as you're cutting. So the riving knife makes sure the board doesn't cut in and sort of like pinch the blade. So that's what a riving knife is, stop the wood from pinching the blade. Because if the blade gets pinched by the wood, this is where you get kickbacks potentially, and kickbacks can be, that's losing a hand.
Dangerous.
Or potentially.
I've only seen a riving knife on the Festool. I don't really see them on the other.
DeWalt has them.
The other, like DeWalt, Makita.
Yeah, most of them take them off because of imbeciles.
Oh, do they?
But it's stupid. I honestly, but we can use a thinner blade on it. Well, buy the saw for the thinner blade then. Just don't. It's been put there for a reason. Don't take it off. It's fucking stupid. It really is. So you also have negative and positive rake, which is another big one that people don't realise at all. So this has to do with blade direction as well. So quite often a plunge saw will use negative rake. And quite often people will go and buy a small blade for a chop saw and put it on a plunge saw. No, a chop saw has positive rake on it. So the rake is the angle of the tooth. Is that so? Basically, if you put a positive rake onto a negative rake, you're going to cause the teeth to basically grab it, throw the piece of wood out, or you're going to get a kickback, or it's dangerous. Don't do it. So they're the main things. So you need to make sure blade diameter, kerf to start with, and also make sure you get the correct rake for the blade for the saw that you need. So they are the three things you cannot change. They are fundamental there for a reason. Next is amount of teeth. Now, this is generally marked in TPI, which stands for tooth or teeth per inch. So, and that's just how they're measured. So, the higher the number, obviously, the more teeth, and also that gives you the finer cut. So, if you're doing on a plunge, let's go back to plunge saws or table saws, for example. Let's stick with the plunge saw actually. So the plunge saw, it's very common. You can get like a 12 tooth or a 14 tooth blade. Now these are referred to as cougar blades, panther blades, depending on the brands, and they have 12 or 14 tooth. Now these are perfect for hardwoods. And again, with a plunge saw, don't go full depth. Do it in 2 or 3 passes. Yeah, it'll do it in one. It will do it 50 mil in one pass. There's no need. You put an extra prep. You put in potential burn marks on the wood. You put an extra pressure on the saw. Do 50 mil in 3 passes. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, so you go for oak, you'll go for like a 12 tooth. It's a hardwood, so you go with like a 12 tooth. General ripping. So general ripping is when you're going with the grain. You will use a 24 tooth blade because you're going with the grain. There's not a lot of resistance from the wood. So 24 tooth will give you a nice clean cut. Cross grain. So of course you're going to cross the grain. This is more fibrous. There's more resistance from the piece of wood to your blade. But if you use a 12 tooth, you'll get a lot of tear out, which isn't nice and a load more work. So you go with a 48 tooth blade for crosscuts. Admittedly, if I'm just cutting a bit, I won't swap from the 24. A 24 tooth blade generally lives in my saw, as a general rule, but I will swap it out for oak. Likewise, MDF, 48 tooth gives you a cleaner cut. Then they do triple chip blades. So triple chip then has an added coating on the blade, and it's for things like melamine, formica, compact laminates. Unfortunately, the compact laminates, a lot of lads will just use whatever blades rip through because compact laminate kills blades. There's nothing you can do about it. It kills blades. So you're best pricing 2 or 3 blades in if you're doing a compact laminate kitchen job. It's very, very hard stuff. So
what's compact laminate?
I'm not attached. It's like a resin almost. So it's like the resiny type, plasticky worktops. So they're not wooden.
Yeah, that's just gonna just
blunt
chew
them
them to
quick.
death.
You'll know yourself. LVT flooring. If you ever do any LVT flooring, it proper dulls your blades. So like you're doing an LVT floor, you'll go through even though it cuts really quickly and you snap it, it'll go through a million you go through an awful lot of Stanley knife blades on LVT because plastic just dulls. You know yourself, if you put a Stanley knife blade, you cut a bit of carpet out and you run it across the concrete, it dulls the end, doesn't it? Super quick. And this plastic, the composite laminate is,
Yeah.
it's great for the worktops. I'm not saying it's not, but yeah, it's very hard. So yeah, it's blade choice. The 3 fundamentals are size, curve, rake of the tooth. After that, it's low tooth for solid woods, 24 tooth for with the grain, especially doing ripping, and then obviously 48 tooth for MDF and crosscuts. Next up was jigsaws that we mentioned yesterday, and it was just hilarious because on the side of your jigsaw, you generally have 2 or 3 little dots or lines. Now, according to Josh, this is how much the saw blade moves side to side. It is not. That is wrong. It made me laugh an awful lot. So, yeah, you would not have it moving side to side because that would then cause blade wander. The blade would be falling out. You'd have a super wide cut, and yeah, it was hilarious that you thought it was that. It's orbital. It's orbital.
So
So,
what does it do? What do you
so
mean? Goes round and
you
round.
have with Sanders. You also obviously you have orbital. Orbital is round. So you were sort of right to it's not side to side, it's the motion of the blade.
Yeah.
So as a jigsaw blade, so random orbital, it does all different sort of like it goes all over the place in random orbits. Orbital is always just round and round and round, which is like a geared sander. It always just goes round, just turns. It doesn't move up and down, side to side, it just goes round. So with your jigsaw blade is going up and down. Orbital, it is ever so slightly cutting in an orbit as well. Now, those 3 marks are how much orbit is on that blade. So as you move those numbers, the little like little lever to like 1, 2, or 3, it changes the angle of the jigsaw blade to what it hits the piece of wood at. So if you were doing sheet metal and you had it on number 3, that sheet metal, I mean, obviously, I know you'd have a metal blade in, well, I don't know, because that's blades again. So, but you have a metal blade in jigsaw. If you had that on number 3, that sheet of metal will jump up and down like mad. If you have it on 0, there is no orbital action. It only goes up and down. That sheet of metal won't vibrate, it'll just cut. So 0 is there's no orbital, and it only goes up and down. As you move it to number 1, 2, and 3, it moves the angle of the jigsaw blade and also the amount of orbital. Now, on softwoods, say pine, if you were to put that on number 3, the blade is hitting it, it gives you a cleaner cut. So you do have to sort of play around with it a little bit for what type of material it is you're using, how clean the cut is. But yeah, basically, number 3 is there's the most amount of orbital in the blade from vertical to round. So the blade moves from, say, rather than going from between 12 and 3 o'clock, sorry, 12 and 6 o'clock, it'll go between 12 and, say, 7 o'clock and 6. It'll go 12, 6, 7, 12, 6, 7, 12, 6, 7. You move that to number 3, and exaggerating it doesn't move this much. It'll go 12, 6, 9, 12, 6, 9, 12, so it cuts out and scoops more. So this effectively is creating a bit of a back cut almost on the wood, which gives you a cleaner cut. So yeah, it is in fact orbital settings for different types of wood. Yeah,
I'll take back what I said then.
So I think that covers the main bits. I mean, again, any questions with it all, mate? Anybody gives a thing, but we're going to start doing this other little section now, where we are going to be asking all our guests in future as well. You want to hear your favourite jokes? So we're talking about dad jokes here. So if you are coming on as a guest, please no racist or non-PC jokes because we would not want the channel to be taken down. Rude jokes, 100% not a problem. But yeah, it was just something we thought about, just a bit of light-hearted fun. So this is actually my girlfriend's favourite joke, and I think it's awful. But there you go. So, why was the pasty waiting on the corner? It was meat. It was meat and potato.
I don't know.
And the penny drops. It's awful, isn't it? It really is awful.
I
know, but
it's more of a statement, isn't it?
I know, everything she has to tell it all. Yeah,
that's like one of them jokes on the back of the penguin.
I totally forgot about that. The good old chocolate penguin biscuits. I didn't know they still did them because I don't buy them. But Josh was saying, it reminded me that you used to get little jokes or facts on the side of your packet when you had a chocolate biscuit. I think that was probably their sort of way of thinking that, here's a really unhealthy snack, but here's a bit of goodness for you, and give you an interesting fact or a joke or something. So, yeah, that was so. So, come on, Josh, have you got yourself a joke yet? I think you're still googling, everyone. Go on, who's there?
Knock knock.
Cows go. Who?
Cows go. No cows go moo.
I've heard that one before. That's a proper dad joke, that, isn't it? That's brilliant. So, any questions, anybody, please get in contact via our either Woodwork page. You can also reach out to Josh or myself on our own Instagram profiles. All links will be down below. We are on all major Audible platforms and also on YouTube. Yeah, thanks very much, everyone, for tuning in, and we shall catch you next week.